to the We All Follow podcast. My name is Matt Fox. I'm your host. Today, we are joined by an all-American crew. Sean, welcome back to the show. Great to have you on.
Yeah, how's it going? How's it going, everybody out there?
It's been better. It's been worse. You know what I mean? Getting another man sent off at Bournemouth was not what I had in my weekend plans, but 1-0 to the Arsenal Shakhtar win makes it a lot sweeter. And also joining the show for the first time, we have Franko. Welcome on, Kyle.
Hey, thanks for having me. You guys are deep into your bench today. Calling me up from the reserves, hopefully to help you out. I don't know if I'll give you any wisdom, but I'll just get real quickly for those of you who don't. Obviously, your followers don't know, but I am a Fulham supporter. So maybe a view from mid-table as opposed to teams that are chasing the Champions League spots.
Well, we call it the Arsenal B team, and we've been following you guys fondly. So you're in the right place for sure. All right, let's jump into it. And Kyle, where can folks find you on the social medias?
You can find me at KJ_Franko on X. That's Franko with a K. I still call it Twixter though. It's half Twitter, half Twixter, but it's KJ_Franko with a K.
All right, hit Kyle with a follow. Follow us on X at We All Follow Pod, the artist formerly known as Twitter. And let's jump right into it, boys. Sean, what was your moment of the week?
I'm gonna go with a Champions League moment of the week because we have the Ballon d'Or coming up on Monday night, and you watched Real Madrid go down 2-0 at halftime in a rematch of the final, and then the guy that's gonna walk away with the Ballon d'Or on Monday night, Vinicius Jr. came through and posted a 3 second half goals, a perfect 10 on the SofaScore rankings, and just kind of. Just basically, showed why he's going to win that award. Just watching that team, and you knew Dortmund was going to be up for that game after the loss in the final. But to go 2-0 down and then come back and win, I thought that was pretty good, obviously. And then in the Premier League, hey, look, Manchester United finally got a win, so we can kind of celebrate that. Although his team on Thursday basically brought me right back down to earth. So thanks, Tanakh. Terrible. You're on mute.
My moment is.
Sorry.
I'll go. My moment of the week. I'll keep it in the Champions League, and since we want to stay Premier League topical, the incomparable Erling Haaland. What a goal for Manchester City. What would you call that? A scorpion kick, a scissors kick? I don't know what you would call that, but I don't know if there's another player in the world who could execute that kind of goal. It's what fascinates me about Haaland is he's a guy who he doesn't touch the ball a whole lot, right? When you watch Manchester City play, think about sometimes you could use your fingers and toes to count all the touches he has in a match, and then you look up and he's got 2 or 3 goals because he's just that dynamic and that efficient in front of goal. He's a player whom I love watching him play striker because of how hungry he is for goals, the way he wants to get to every ball in the box. And then when you have that kind of athletic ability, I think that's something special to watch. I know Sean and others have their thoughts about Manchester City and the way they do business, but I think you can still appreciate the way Erling Haaland plays and the way he scores goals. City, after the draw on the first week of the Champions League, back-to-back wins. They're up to 7 points there. By the way, Aston Villa, Liverpool, Man City, the top 3 in that extended Champions League table. So far, so good for the Premier League clubs.
Yeah, it's definitely been a good run of form for the Premier League clubs in the Champions League. That was a goal that I think the only other person who can score that is probably Olivier Giroud, who I saw somebody say that if you only looked at Giroud's highlights, you would think that he was the greatest striker ever to play, because his highlight tape is second to none. But yeah, that was an awesome goal from Haaland. There was honorable mention, the 3-2 Leicester win over Southampton, coming from behind with 3 second half goals and a late winner by Jordan Ayew, who kicked it past a limp-handed Aaron Ramsdale. Thanks for the money. Thanks for the memories, brother. The Aribo shot in the Southampton, his goal was very well taken. I think I forgot to mention him a couple weeks ago after they played Arsenal. He's a very tidy player, and I think he would do well for a mid-table team, presuming that Southampton's going to be going down. But I think my moment of the week was the 2 hat tricks to set up the El Clasico this weekend. So you had Rafinha with the hat trick for Barcelona in their 4-1 drubbing of Bayern Munich. And then you had the, like you said already, Sean, the Vinicius Jr. hat trick in their 5-2 win over Borussia Dortmund. 2 massive players, 2 massive clubs who are going to be clashing this week. So that will definitely be a fun one. I think personally, I think that Rodri should win the Ballon d'Or based on not only his club team's performance, but also his national team performance in guiding his team to winning the Euros this past summer. But I don't think you can be mad about either of them winning. They're both super class players. But that brings us into the table. So after 8 rounds of games, we have Liverpool in first, followed by Man City, Arsenal, Aston Villa, who's holding the spot in fourth, Brighton, Chelsea, Spurs, and then we have Forest, Newcastle, who's continuing to drag ass a little bit, followed by Fulham, who after a good run of games have dropped a couple in a row. We have Bournemouth. Way down here, in 12th, we have Manchester United.
We're climbing the table.
Rounding out the bottom of the table, we have Brentford, Leicester, West Ham. In the relegation spots, we have Palace, Southampton, and Wolves. Glasner, who is allegedly not on the hot seat after another, every disappointing performance. And Ipswich, who are also climbing up the table. But they took a bad one at Everton this weekend.
One draw at a time for Ipswich.
One draw at a time. I mean, you can get to 40 points if you draw them all. You know what I mean? Throw a win in there, and you got your 40 to stay up. So that's how the table sits after 8 matches. And we have a top-of-the-table match, top-of-the-table clash. Join us on Discord. Follow us on X. Do all of the like, subscribe, notifications, do all of it. And that sets us up for a wonderful match week 9. Kyle, which one of these games do you want to start with?
I guess we should start with Arsenal Liverpool, right? If we're talking about the top of the table, Liverpool 21 points, Arsenal 17 points, and I think that's probably the marquee match of the weekend. I mean, Matt, I think with Arsenal, the big thing is you got to keep 11 players on the pitch. That's something you can control. It's something Arteta has got to address with his team, because when you're chasing the title, you can't be dropping points because you're getting players sent off. And I know you look at some of that, and it's a little bit of it's assault, right? You feel like it's a little bit of a.
Did you think that one was do you think that one should have been a red card?
It's in the gray area, because he still had a long way to go, right? The attacking player. The ball over the top, they get tangled up. But those little things like that, they add up over the course of the season, right? When you have to play a man down for that long, or you have the Man City game where they held on for so long and so admirably with 10 men, and then you concede it in the final seconds. So I think they just got to go back. They got to look at their discipline. You got to make sure, hey, when we're in these games, especially in these top of the table clashes, like you need to beat Liverpool this weekend, right? You're 4 points behind them. You don't want to let them get too far away from you. Keep your discipline. Keep 11 players on the pitch, and then I think is Arsenal. You probably feel pretty good about your chance to win.
It's going to be a tough one for sure. Sean, just touching back on last week's call, did you think that was deserving of a red card?
I mean, it's so like Kyle. I mean, it's so far from goal. It's He gave it as I forget. He gave it as a red card
He
first.
gave it as a yellow, and
Gave
then
it a
VAR
C.
made him go to the screen.
Yeah, I mean this is one of my problems with VAR. I mean, he's right there. You know, I mean, he's in the middle of the play. You're when you start to look at this, like he's out there, the ref is out there, he's watching the thing develop, and he says, "Listen, it's not a red, it's a yellow because for whatever reason, it's you got the whole half the pitch to go." You maybe have another defender that could come on, whatever it is. And he says it's not a red card. And then you go over and you look at it in slow motion. And some of these things, when you go and you look at a tackle where a guy comes in, and studs up on your knee, and you might not, because it's so quick, it happens so quickly during the game, you might not see it like quickly. And then, you go over and you look and you see the tackle and you're like, man, that's a bad challenge. Like, this, I think if your first inclination is to give a yellow card in the middle of that and you go over and you look at it in slow motion, like, and you change, it's just like, why are you changing that? And that's just the way I think. Like, if it's a yellow card on the pitch in the middle of the action when you're playing it through and it's not something that happens, quickly. I mean, you give yourself time to figure out what's going on. I think you got to stick with that. Like that's my only problem there. And, I
think it's one of those that can be given either way. The way that I try to think about it is like, how would I feel if it was the other way? Right. So if it was Martinelli and Virgil van Dijk, how would I feel? Right. And that's, to me, it's like perfect could go either way. Right. Like but at the same time, I don't think that's ever called against Van Dijk. Right. If it's Martinelli running out, like that's never getting called against him. Right.
I think
that's always a yellow card.
There was another incident later in the week,
the same day or the next day.
It
with
was
Chelsea,
like
the Chelsea Liverpool game.
Yeah, it was the same type of play and same thing. And like they didn't even say it. And you're just like, wait a second, like it just happened. Like, why is there no uproar about it?
And that's the thing, is you have the actual foul, which I think can go either way, and I understand, right? I don't think that foul is going to get given a red, and it wasn't, and that's the ruling on the field, right? The level of VAR intervention is supposed to be higher, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing. It's like we're only supposed to overturn it if it's a wildly egregious decision. So if that's like, it's like, I think the thing that we've all been saying all season on this podcast is about consistency. Right. And consistency within the game, within the framework of each game, and consistency throughout many games. Right. And so if your VAR framework is that it needs to be a high bar, then I don't think it met that threshold. Like it wasn't super egregious. The ball wasn't dropping onto his foot for him to be able to play it on. And I think he had a lot of work to do. And that's not even counting the Ben White being on the same plane as the attacker and being able to meet him at a reasonable position. Again, I think that call can go either way, but I think you got to stick with the call in the field unless it's so egregious that it has to be overturned, right? And I think that that's the level of consistency that we as fans want to see. And like, again, it's the same thing as the Man City game. Like nobody's watching that game 10v11, right? Like TVs are getting shut off, and it's 30 minutes into the game. That was actually a really good tactical match. Like Bournemouth were on the attack for the first 15 minutes. I think Arsenal didn't. They looked disorganized, and then they kind of settled into it in that second 15-minute block. And then you get this guy sent off on something that I think can be avoided. And I think the playing games with 11 men should be the standard, unless it's so egregious that it has to get changed, right? And I think that's should be the bar that we're looking for with the referees. Kyle?
I was actually going to jump over to Liverpool real quickly in first place. I think this is about as good as you could have expected if you were a Liverpool fan, considering the managerial change, and maybe you had Jurgen Klopp for so long and it was such a certain style and you knew what you were going to get. And then he steps down and Arne Slot comes in, and now look at Liverpool, 7 wins, just the one loss of 21 points. Luis Diaz, Mo Salah are both amongst the goals. They got 5 each. I was just curious, your perspective on Liverpool as a title contender. I think we knew they were going to be in the top 4 mix. Did we think they were going to be a title contender, though? And I know it's only match week 9, but they certainly have looked the part so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think they look good, and I think it's interesting. I think they found the perfect coach for them that was enough to mold into what they do and tweak things a little bit, but not trying to overturn the apple cart, right? And so far, it seems like he's striking a perfect balance. I mean, our good friend and co-host of the show, Nigel, he puts out his strength of schedule every week. In terms of the Premier League, they've had a ridiculously easy schedule, which fair fucks. That's the way that the schedule draw came out. And if you're a new manager and if you're a Liverpool fan, you would hope and pray that you got an easy schedule, and it allows you to build confidence. And I think as they come into this tougher run of fixtures, as I think we talked about last week, we'll see how they cope with the next few weeks and facing a good team, although injury depleted Arsenal. But they're gonna have some tests in the next couple of weeks. But also a lot of their tests are coming at home, right? So I think that they have a great shot to be in the title picture for the foreseeable future. As obviously we all play the same 2019 teams, but the order and how that all shakes out matters a lot. Sean, what do you think about Salah?
By the way, Nottingham Forest now up to 5th in the live table now as we look right now. Look, I mean, I think before the season I wasn't sure, how they would play. A lot of these guys in the last year of their contract. Trent, a lot of noise about him, Real Madrid, and Van Dijk and Salah and all these guys, and I think they got the kind of like you guys both said, the easier start to the season. But, last week, I thought that was a pretty big win over Chelsea, who's been playing pretty well.
But again, that was at Anfield, right? And if you look at their run of next fixtures, they go to Arsenal, and then after that they face Brighton twice, once in the cup at Brighton, but then in the league it's Brighton at home,
Brighton at home,
Leverkusen at home, Villa at home. Their away game is Southampton.
City at home.
Madrid at home. The next hard away game after this one is the Newcastle one, right? So, which is December 4th after the next international break. So, I think ultimately, like I said, you got to play the 19 teams, and if this run is easy, then the second half of the season is going to be pretty tough, right? So we'll see. And they've had no injuries, right? Up until this point, they've had no injuries. Salah is playing unbelievable. I think he has something like 7 goals and 7 assists in 12 games in all competitions, which is just absolutely ridiculous.
Klopp left all the inhalers when he left. I guess I don't know what happened.
Just to kind of, I'll just quickly on Matt's point. He talked about the Liverpool schedule. They also have Leverkusen and Real Madrid in the Champions League in November coming up. So it's certainly going to get real very quickly.
But both of those games are at Anfield, right? That's the thing. Yep. Is yes, playing those teams no matter what is challenging, right? But having them come to England, it's going to be cold, it's different gravy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's going to be a tough game. I think Arsenal have an uphill battle. We'll see if Saka's fit. We'll see. Who knows the back four, right? You have Saliba suspended. You have Calafiori, who looked like he could have blown out his knee this past weekend. It doesn't sound like it's too bad, but he's going to be out for a few games. You have, you already have Timber, who's unlikely to play. So you're looking at either Alexander Zinchenko, who hasn't played in a while, or just turned 18-year-old Miles Lewis-Skelly to play left back against Salah. And Zinchenko's been getting cooked by him for God knows how long, right? And he hasn't played. So at this point, I would go with Miles Lewis-Skelly, the younger player, even though he's not as experienced, but it's tough throwing him in against that wood chipper that is Mohamed Salah. Sean?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I think Arsenal is going to have a tough go of it there with everything kind of that you said. And um, you know, I think my game, that I would be looking at is the Chelsea Newcastle game. I think, you know. What's wrong with Newcastle? Like, what's their deal? I know Chelsea's been playing, basically they're, 2 points apart in the table there. But man, if Chelsea wins that game and Manchester United could do something, get a point get a point at West Ham or get a win at West Ham, Manchester United all of a sudden is ahead of Newcastle on the table. And I think, that was the thing with Newcastle last year. They kind of, like, it's like plateaued a little bit, and they didn't make it into Europe at the end of the last year, because of the greatest FA Cup victory of all time. So all of a sudden coming into this year, everyone's like, Newcastle will be back. They're not in Europe. They don't have to play these extra games. And you look up and they've only scored. Everybody talks about Manchester United's problems. 7. They've only scored. Newcastle's only scored 8 goals, and they have allowed 8 goals in 8 matches. So, they're not scoring a lot as well. And this Chelsea team, I thought they played pretty well against Liverpool. And I think they're definitely headed in the right direction. They looked pretty good, obviously, in the Conference League midweek, but they've started to play better. And I think a dangerous team scoring goals. So, for Newcastle, and we talked about some of these other, the schedules coming up for these teams. I mean, Newcastle's got
this a home and home with essentially they play in the cup 3 days later.
Yep, and then they got Arsenal the following week. They got to go to Nottingham Forest, who's playing, much better. Then they got, West Ham, Palace, Liverpool, Brentford, Leicester, some winnable games obviously there. But I just don't know. When they made it into the, they made to the Carabao Cup final, obviously lost to Manchester United, and they finished top 4, and they went into the Champions League, and everyone just thought, this is Newcastle's time. They've arrived. They're going to kick on here and go, like City did when they first arrived, and it hasn't happened like that. And it's just, is it going to happen, or is this a project that's going to take 5 years? Because if they don't,
I think you had those shouts. You had those shouts of Eddie Howe getting replaced, right? Yep. And I think they made the decision to stick with him. And it's obviously it's early in the season. There's a lot that can happen, but you're kind of getting that feeling that he's run them as much as he can. Last year they had a ton of injuries, which, like, again, everybody has injuries, and I don't think it's an excuse, but it's a factor, right? But this year you don't have injuries. You're not playing in Europe, and I think you got to put up or shut up at some point.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I think, look, obviously Manchester United gets a lot, Ten Hag, and look, it's terrible and whatever, and they get a lot of the Ten Hag out, and you hear all this stuff, but and Newcastle's obviously a much smaller club, so you don't get as much of that noise around it. But they haven't been great, and
no, they're underlying. If you care about underlying statistics, Newcastle and Man United are right next to each other with expected goals, expected goals allowed.
Yep, they can't do this stuff.
And we're talking about Eric Ten Hag watch, right? And Eddie Howe's just skating along unscathed.
Yeah, exactly, and I think when the owners of Newcastle took over, like, once again, you're in the Champions League after finishing in 4th place 2 seasons ago. I think they thought they would be a little bit further along in this project. The problem too is now, if it doesn't happen this year, Guimaraes, why is he going to stay? Isak's already talking about leaving. They already have the problems with the PSR and all this other stuff. So, now if you start losing some main players and you have to rebuild again, I mean, it's hard. It's just, you get into this little cycle, and the Premier League is tough. I mean, you look at the table now, and all Villa is good, and Arsenal's good, and City's good, and Liverpool's good, and Brighton's good, and Chelsea's good, and Spurs are always going to be all right, and stuff like this. So, I mean,
the mid-table, the Premier League mid-table is a vortex.
you're
and it
not
sucks you
guaranteed
back
to
in.
finish anywhere near the top 4 anymore, like you were 10 years ago or 15 years ago. If you're one of
Like
these,
this, yeah, you're right. Like this Newcastle team, like 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, is easily in European places, right? But the level has. Go ahead.
I was just gonna jump on Chelsea, which I think has got off to a decent start this year. I know they lost to Liverpool last time out, but if you watch Chelsea at the end of the year under Pochettino, they were playing better as the year. They got off to that awful start last season, and everybody was so down on Chelsea. And look, they're easy to make a joke of because of the size of the squad and the way that they'll just buy whatever the sharpest, tiniest object, the whatever the shiniest object in the shop window is. But they finished last year really well. They made a great buy in Cole Palmer. Like that dude's a star. He had 22 goals in 33 appearances last year. He's already
friend of the show.
He's already got 6 goals in 7 appearances this season. He's broken into the England team. And obviously they made the managerial change, but Maresca is coming up from after getting Leicester promoted. And I think Chelsea is kind of had a little bit of a continuation of the way they finished last season because there's been finally some continuity in that squad, in that some of the same players that finished the season with them are still there. Yes, it's a new manager, but I think there's some continuity, some familiarity there, and I think that's helped Chelsea get off to a much better start this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Chelsea have definitely they've been playing pretty well. I think they got a little bit exposed last week against Liverpool, but again, this is showing the levels of where these projects are at, right? And if you're looking at a team that's been at the top for the last 8-9 years at this point, right, versus a team that's been under a lot of turmoil and upheaval, you're seeing the difference. And it's interesting because I don't think Liverpool has a particularly good midfield, but I think Chelsea's is worse. They've spent more money and they have an inferior product, which continues to confound me with Caicedo as well as Enzo Fernandez. Cole Palmer is an amazing player, and he continues to perform. And I think it was a really interesting and clever thing keeping him out of the Conference League group or league phase. They didn't name him as one of the players, so he's ineligible to play in that competition. And I think they are doing a really good job of protecting him. He has the potential to really be a superstar. And I would say he's definitely one of the best number 10s in the league at this point. So
is that the football version of load management, not putting him on the Conference League roster?
Yeah, I think it is. It's the most teams would just put him on the roster and not play him, but I think it really forced their hand, and they're like, you got to figure out this competition without him. And it's a Conference League. You're playing with teams that have more consonants than vowels in places that are far away, right? So you don't want these guys, if you can avoid it and avoid that level of travel, then everybody would do it if they could get away with it. Sean, you've had your ups and downs this season with Mr. Ten Hag. You got a pretty big mid-table clash coming up this weekend, ultimately against West Ham.
Losing man guys fired.
Who's going to get fired first?
Yeah.
Loser. What do they call it? Loser goes home.
Loser goes home.
Loser leaves town match.
Loser leaves town.
I don't know. I think after yesterday, the calls are for him to leave are getting louder. So
let's talk about yesterday. You guys went out to Fenerbahce, which is always a tough trip. Any going to Turkey, which is funny as Americans, right? Because going from England to Turkey is equivalent from going from California to New York. to put things in perspective for all of our American listeners. So it's not the craziest trip. It's a solid flight, though, and on a short turnaround. But how did you think the performance was out in Turkey for Man U?
I mean, the giveaway. I just, you got Lindelof on the field, and he's, I think he's at fault for the goal. It's 2024, and he's still, getting picked for matches, which is, ridiculous at this point. You got Mizraoui playing as a 10, which is utterly ridiculous at this point. I know, he had 3 healthy midfielders. He keeps blaming injuries, but look, you're training, the overtraining last year trying to catch City and Arsenal prior to the season kind of, I think, has led to that. Obviously the extra matches and everything, but they're not that good. I mean, once again, they're 2 years away. I mean, they got a bunch of players coming up, but this, they don't. It's the fans that go out there and watch it and then get stuck in the ground till 1:15 in the morning afterwards because they didn't kind of let them out of the ground. I mean, it's crazy to go watch these guys play now. It's terrible. I mean, the games are terrible. I think they got outplayed. Jose was going crazy. I don't think that was a penalty at all. So, and Onana did make a couple pretty good saves, but yeah, I mean, they're not any good.
He definitely bailed you guys out on that one.
Yeah. It's just tough watching them. I mean, at this point, I mean, they're not any good. It's just really, really frustrating.
You think West Ham misses David Moyes, or had David Moyes run his course there? Because Lopetegui comes in, not a great start to the year. They get the 4-1 win over Ipswich, and you're like, okay, now maybe they got a little momentum going. They score first against Spurs in match week 8, and then the bottom falls out on them, and they lose that game 4-1. Now I don't think West Ham's going to get sucked into the relegation scrap, but if you're sitting 12-15 and you're West Ham, was that what you wanted when you made the change from Moyes to Lopetegui?
I mean, I think if you're West Ham, I think Moyes was providing a floor, but he was limiting their ceiling, and from my understanding, there was beginning to be some disagreement between the players that Moyes wanted to bring in versus the players because they had installed the new sporting director, and there was some headbutting about the players that they wanted to bring in, and ultimately all of the players they wanted to bring in have been really talented. I'm not sure if Lopetegui is going to be the one. Something that Ben has talked about on this podcast before is about Lopetegui's kind of lack of a system and identity, which it means that you can have a lot of ups and downs, and if you're playing off of whatever your opposition is doing, it takes a lot of the control and results out of your hands, right? So you see them score an early goal and then capitulate. That was almost my moment of the week, was the Kudus fake boxing push thing. That was amazing. Classic. Peak Barclays.
Because he's a good player. Kudus is a good player, right? They have some talented players in that side. Paqueta's there, Edson Alvarez in the middle. Jared Bowen has been a long time Premier League campaigner who's productive year in and year out.
Jared Bowen, friend of the show.
Yeah, it's just but it's you can have talent, but you have to get that talent to play together, to gel, to play as a team, or else you're going to end up in 14th place.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Lopetegui is going to be the guy. I do think that they're going to make a change probably sooner rather than later, is my hunch. But yeah, with the players that they have, that's why in the predictions I picked West Ham to finish in Champions League spots, because I thought that they had the players if they could get their stuff together, that they could make a good push. especially with the attacking talent that they have. I really rate Jared Bowen, Pakata, Kudus, even Antonio. Like you have players who can put in a shift and who are solid Premier League players. And I definitely they got Somerville out of Leeds this last year. You know, they have a good squad, but they certainly haven't been making the most of it. And I don't think a 4-1 loss at Spurs is definitely not the way that they wanted things to go. And then they have Man United. They go to Forest, and Forest seems to be flying pretty high. They have it's tough, man. It's going to be tough for them, and I wouldn't be surprised if they don't make a change before the next break, depending on how the results go. But
15 goals conceded as well. Only Wolves, Southampton, and Ipswich Town have conceded more than 15.
Yeah, that's not great, man. That's not great. And then they're scoring some. Their scoring's not bad, but when you're conceding that amount of goals, it's going to put you in a tough position to win games.
It puts you in a mix with Brentford, Leicester, and Everton.
Right. Yeah, that's not great. That's a bad spot to be in.
Right, and I think they'd rather be up around Chelsea, Tottenham, and Newcastle.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the other matches. We have Villa, Bournemouth. Obviously, the Leicester Forest game is going on as we're recording. The live score on that is 1-1 on the 42nd minute. Brentford, Ipswich. Brentford with an opportunity to get some points. I really rate Thomas Frank. If I was West Ham, I would be going on hiring Thomas Frank mid-season and unleashing him with those players, because I think they are quite a step. I mean, if you look at the wage bills of Brentford versus a West Ham, like you can instantly see that the quality of players. And if he's been doing that with the Mbuemo's really good, but the wage. I mean, Ivan Toney was on like 20K before he went to Saudi, right? So if you can do it with those players, then with the next level of players, you're going to be in a really positive position. We have Brighton hosting Wolves, Man City with what should be a perfunctory opportunity against Southampton, Everton hosting Fulham, which I think we can touch on next. Like we said, Chelsea, Newcastle, Spurs go to Palace, which if you're Ollie Glasner, that's not the team you want coming to town. It's not the team you want coming to town in this time. And then the two big ones that we already discussed. So, Kyle, we have you on. You're a Fulham. You follow Fulham. What do you think about? Well, let's take it back about the performances so far, about the team and the coach, and then we can talk about the specific match this weekend.
Yeah, I think the performances have been pretty good. You go back and my thing with Fulham is the thing that has always sort of been the bugaboo is conceding late goals where you give up points, right? You even go all the way back. You go back to the opener with Manchester United, which Sean and I will joke about in text messages that it's basically like the sun rising. Fulham will concede a late goal to Man United at some point. But last week you get a player sent off, and that certainly hampers you. But they've had some good results. They play some good football. They have a squad that I think should actually be on the cusp of challenging for the European places. Like we're at a point now where I'm not worried about getting sucked into the relegation mix, which is like when you first come up from the championship, that's like that first year, that second year, you're like just ticking off the points as you get further away from the bottom three. I think Fulham's got the club back to a point here where I'm not concerned about that. I like Marco Silva as a manager. You know what you're going to get. Pretty much week in and week out with the style of play. They made some good signings. I thought Emile Smith-Rowe was a really good signing from them. I know you joked off the top about how it kind of being a little bit like Arsenal's the farm team, or like where Arsenal's guys once they leave Arsenal they come to Fulham, but a guy like Smith-Rowe and same as like a guy like Pereira who came from Manchester United, is that a player who I think is a very good player, but kind of got lost in the numbers game at a bigger club. And needed an opportunity to maybe step down the table a little bit to a place like Fulham where the manager is going to play you every day, is going to say, look, you're my guy in this spot. This is how you're going to play. This is the spot we're going to try and get you the ball. I want you to be you. I want you to be confident. I want you to go score goals and impact the game. And I think those players have worked out really well for them. Plus, Raul Jimenez is back in form. He looks like Wolves' Raul Jimenez. He scored a banger of a free kick against the U.S. in the international window. The U.S. B team, by the way, that went down to Mexico. And Anthony Robinson is one of the top 5 left backs in the league. So I like the signings they have made. And now what I want to see him do is just continue to stack wins on top of each other, stack points together, and really try to push for those European spots. See if you can get into that 7th or 8th range where maybe a conference league spot shakes your way after all the cups are decided.
At this point, they have a pretty appealing run of fixtures, with Everton, Brentford, Palace, Wolves, and then that gets you into December, right? So those are all. I don't know what happened with my camera. There we go. Those are all very winnable games, and you could be looking at a team that's collected 12 points from those fixtures, if my math is correct. And in a decent spot, right? And I think they're totally capable of it. I like Bassi as a center back. He played really well against Arsenal last year. The Iwobi, Smith Rowe, Jimenez is flying right now. You have the Tank Traore, who's just a fridge.
Everything is great until he actually has to score a goal.
Yeah. As long as you don't make him shoot, then it's good to go. It's like Rodgers actually scored last week, but Rodgers is giving Adama Traore, like somebody who's just a bully carrying the ball through midfield. And then like once you ask him to do anything past that, the ball, like we talk about the passing cone, like the old Madden passing cone. His passing cone is like this, really small, which means that the ball can go anywhere. So thanks for jumping on, Kyle, last minute. We really appreciate you. Hopefully we can have you on again. Sean, as ever, good luck. Try not to drink too much this weekend as Man United take the L against West Ham. And
one day closer to Ten Hag being gone.
Yeah, I mean, there was a rumor about there being some sort of November timeline for his bonuses or whatever.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, Southgate. Yeah.
So I mean, I think they have Van Nistelrooy who can paper over the cracks for a little bit and hopefully get them through a few matches before old Gareth makes an appearance. But it seems weird, like Potter's still available, right? So who knows what can happen?
Yeah, no, it's not sustainable. So
look, if Southgate wants the Manchester United job, he's getting the Manchester United job.
Yeah,
period.
For sure.
If he just coached, right? He just coached England to the semifinals of the World Cup and the Euros. If the English manager wants the Man United job, he's getting the Man United job.
Yeah, and we didn't get to talk about Tuchel much last week. He was appointed right before the show, and all of the tomfoolery that these people were talking about didn't happen until after we recorded. But it's just so hilarious to me the preposterous takes that the Nevilles and Carragers of the world have about roasting the players, and then when they actually get a coach who's won stuff, how they should have hired an English coach. It's like, do you guys actually want to win or just want to complain?
Tuchel versus Pochettino, round of 16, World Cup 2026 death match. Book it.
Yeah,
it's coming. It's coming. It's coming.
I'm taking the allegedly cocaine-fueled German. Okay, so allegedly. All right, boys. Thanks for hopping on. It's great to see you guys, and we'll be back soon. Follow us, follow, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss a show, and we'll see you next week.